Oh, hello. Did you think I was a killer clown from outer space? It's just me. Not scary, but we are going to be talking about very scary things like we always do on this channel. It's not the scariest channel ever, but it's close. And today I have Paul from Understanding Conspiracy. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
And he has been compiling this evidence that clowns actually look like Nephilim. And you cannot deny it after watching his, what is it, 66 part series on YouTube?
I think it's like 45 episodes
Oh,
now, but
45 now. Okay.
there's some extras thrown in there and
Oh, yeah, yeah, because the
a
playlist
lot.
said
Yeah,
66. But I mean, it's amazing and there's so much detail in it. And tonight we are going to get into the Nephilim look like clowns. Now, you have a very deep understanding actually of Nephilim to begin with, which a lot of people don't go that deep into it, but can you explain how the Nephilim are actually souls of the giants?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So a lot of my work is that's pardon the pun, based on the back of giants who came before me, if you get what I mean, in the
Uh-huh.
industry of conspiracy. So people like Gary Wayne and Rob Skiba and Michael Heiser and people who've been in the game a lot
Rob
longer than I
Skiba
have.
I've read and Tom Horn I've read.
Yeah. There's been many big names over the years, and I've been doing this for about 10 years myself, maybe a bit longer. But I started the channel in 2014, and I'm a bit of a scattershot conspiracy theorist. I talk about anything and everything, but I did kind of start honing in specifically on biblical history, Enochian history, and started to read the works of these people. And they tell the story or recount many of the stories you can find in these extra biblical texts, like the Book of Enoch, that basically explain that, yeah, in the ancient antediluvian time, so pre-flood world, while Adam was kicked out of the garden and his family were populating the earth, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, basically. And by the sixth generation of humanity coming down from Adam all the way down to the times of Jared, uh, angels descended, and their job was basically to watch over people. They were known as the Watchers, perhaps sent by God, but it seems like they requested to come down and do this thing. And it seems like a large portion of them all got together on Mount Hermon and decided to make a pact, and under mutual imprecations of the consequences, which they knew they'd have to suffer for doing such a thing, they all made a deal to basically take wives of human women and create their own offspring. And those offspring are the Nephilim, which
Mhm,
became giants,
mhm.
demigods, half human, half angel hybrids, which were worshipped as gods themselves, practically connections to gods, ladders to God, the intermediaries between the angels and man type of thing.
Right.
But they kept getting bigger, and they ended up eating people because the provisions mankind were creating just weren't enough to satiate giants the size of mountains. It
Mhm,
got
mhm.
a bit out of hand.
Well, the
And
Epic of Gilgamesh actually talks about that. They could not subdue him because he was eating everyone and
that's
R-wording
right.
all the women, right?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
okay.
That story's everywhere. It's all over the earth. A lot of my work kind of goes into this on my channel, and it's kind of you find that the Nephilim story
Mhm.
has many names under many characters with many culturally specific ways of telling the story with different costumes and different imagery, but they're all basically talking about this same odd occurrence where dragons, so seraphim class angels, which seraph basically means in Hebrew fiery flying serpents. So serpent like angels, so dragons mixed with humans and created monstrous dragon like hybrid human creatures which ate people. Now, to fast forward and summarize what happened here is after a few generations after that, to the generation of Noah, it was time basically to hit the reset from God's perspective. All mankind had utterly corrupted themselves, given into worshipping the false gods, the watchers, and the children. And all mankind was just evil continuously and was taught a lot of terrible things by these watcher class angels. So it seems like the watchers basically had an agenda to corrupt God's creation. And
Right. And so
yeah.
well,
So
we
go
go
ahead.
into that in a show we did about the Book of Enoch. So the
Mhm.
Watchers teaching things like metalworking and seduction and
Oh, yeah.
right.
Absolutely, the making of weapons,
Mhm.
makeup, and makeup's a double-edged sword, and it's kind of not simply just to attract mates and to play with sexual immorality. But as my work points out, the act of using makeup and dressing a certain way is actually a spiritually understood tool to channel entities from the spirit realm. So it also
Interesting. Okay.
basically teaching necromancy and the rest.
Okay.
So the punishment for the Watchers who did this, if you follow all these stories, is that they had to watch their beloved ones kill each other, and that's their children, the Nephilim. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems like the War of the Giants in the Book of the Giants, all the Nephilim basically wiped each other out in
Mm-hmm.
petty feudal squabbles over rulership and land. They were very prideful creatures, and they basically thought they should be the only gods on earth, so started killing each other. And the angels had to watch this. And then the angels were bound in chains in Tartarus until the final judgment at Armageddon. But after that, there was like a time period of maybe 250 years before the flood came, where the
Mm-hmm.
giants were all gone. But it seems like the giants' children and their children and their children's children were still around.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the Nephil, the Eliud, and the Elio. They're like lesser, smaller, 1/8 angel, 1/16 angel hybrids, human hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like some of the angels didn't mate with human women, so didn't suffer the consequences and didn't get chained, but they were still in rebellion. So they decided, okay, so we're not going to have sex with people again, but instead let's teach mankind how to corrupt their own DNA. And this is what's called in the book of Jared as the mixing of kinds. And it's
Mm-hmm.
also mentioned in the book of Giants as well, that they basically just slapped a bunch of animals together and created monsters, hybrid chimeras.
Chimeras.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Remember
Chimeras.
Tex
Yeah,
Mars, he's a classic. He would talk about those things.
that's it.
And
And that was the
making
time.
chimeras and spiders in space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was happening just before the flood. So that's what it's explained. And humanity was mixing themselves with animals too. So
Mm.
that's where you get centaurs, werewolves, fishermen,
Oh,
mermaids, sirens,
okay.
half horse, half human, half fish, half human, whatever you want to mix together. Spider-Men, Mothmen, name a cryptid. That's where they were all created, it seems. But
Bigfoot.
yeah,
Dog
well,
man. We
the
love
dog
all
man.
that stuff. Late at night, we put on like stupid, silly, like spooky videos and stuff, like unsolved mysteries and like things that you could never even, what even is that thing crawling around? But
Well, biblically, there is an explanation. There was a
yeah.
time when mankind was taught the knowledge to genetically engineer themselves to be half human animal hybrids.
Mhm.
And they basically became mutants, or to name a comic book, they are X-Men. They used to be men, but now they're something else. And it
Interesting.
seems like,
Okay. We
if,
talked about X-Men last week.
yeah, but if you think about it,
Mhm.
if a flood's on its way, and you see Noah over there building this boat, telling everybody, repent, God's going to send judgment, the rain's coming. And a lot of people are like, well, he seems like he's well clued in, but I don't really want to give up all my power. And maybe I'll just give myself gills instead. Maybe I can survive a flood. So that seems to be what a lot of the choices people were making, was to corrupt themselves to try and be hardier, stronger, and more able to survive something like a global deluge.
Mm.
If you can hibernate for long periods of time like a bear underground, then you may not suffer the consequences of everything on the dry land getting destroyed. If you
Right.
have the fins of a fish or the gills of a fish, a flood's not really much of a problem. So it seems like that was happening, and the flood came, and somehow they made it afterwards. So I'll give you some explanations of how that could have happened. If you don't want to go that far, because it could be considered blasphemous to a lot of Christians to think the flood didn't do its job, um, other than destroying all the infrastructure of the
Well,
Nephilim, the
it said
buildings, the
they
kingdom.
survived. I mean, it said there's giants and then after, right?
Exactly. But
Okay.
what I have many theories in my book. I explain in the first 10 chapters this biblical history narrative. I'm summarizing very quickly here for time,
Mhm.
but over the 10 chapters, I give many theories on how that happened. Now, there's many ways they could have come afterwards, and I've just given you a couple there. Another one could simply be the knowledge was maintained somehow. The Book of Enoch talks about tablets being kept in vaults underground. It's possible Nimrod rediscovered the vaults when he was building his Tower of Babel and making his own kingdom, and
Mhm.
found the knowledge and learnt how to make mutants again and how to resurrect the Nephilim, or maybe get in touch with angels and have a second incursion type thing going on. Who knows? But we know they did come after the flood.
Mhm.
Now, it makes it very clear in the Book of Enoch, when a Nephilim dies, its spirit wanders the earth and it's stuck here, and they become unclean spirits or demons.
Okay.
It's unclear whether or not people who have done the genetic engineering thing also suffer the same fate by virtue of corrupting their body and their soul. Maybe they're also stuck on the other side and are what we define as demons. But we do know for certain the half angel, half human hybrids, the original OG, official Nephilim, not these faux petty Nephilim humans who did it to themselves. Literally,
Inferior Nephilims.
yeah, yeah, not the fake ones, not the
Right.
humans trying to be like Nephilim, but the original Nephilim. We know 100% they are what we call demons today,
Hmm.
here on Earth, just
Hmm.
behind a veil we can't perceive. They
Right.
never left the Earth. They are still there, and as we'll get into today, they look like clowns when they were wandering the Earth, and they look like jesters in the spirit realm today.
Well, just explain that a little bit because so you're saying that records describe them as having pale skin, bright red hair, uh the big red mouth. You're explaining that's from, blood and cannibalism, and that's how they're depicted.
Oh
And this
yeah.
might explain why, we have this universal distaste for clowns. Like nobody likes them, but somehow they're here. And well, let me just show you what I got real quick, and then we can talk about all of the clowns and the demonic things that you've sussed out. So we were talking about Beyonce on Sam Tripoli, and I forgot that maybe you can add this to your knowledge repertoire about clowns, but this is from a video promotion that Beyonce did back maybe like 10 years ago for her tour, where it was like a royal theme. The aesthetic was that she is the queen,
Mm-hmm.
but in this like vignette that they made about her coming to London, they show this evil jester. So they put a crown on her, they put all the vestments on her. She's coming out regal. They forget the skirt for some reason, even though it has the structure of a skirt. Um, And then this evil like DJ Jester comes out and he's really like gross looking, and it's very mind control, very monarch mind control, and he's like the puppet master controlling even Beyonce and her court.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that?
I've not seen it. No.
Oh, okay. So yeah, look up her promotion for the show at the O2 Arena in London, a video called Bow Down. So
Okay.
maybe yeah, add that to your stuff because this I kind of well, the Joker, the Jester, that's a Jungian archetype, right? People could
Mm-hmm.
just explain it like that, or it's the Fool card of the tarot.
Yes,
But if you look closer, it's actually well, it's connected to Freemasonry
that's right.
through the Royal Order of the Jesters and their invitation only, which is like a Shriners group that's affiliated with Masonry, but it's a more private group. And so they're known for like drinking, gambling, just like debauchery kind of stuff, hazing, sex stuff. But they've also kind of gotten in trouble in the past or been suspected of worse things like, human TRAFF and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So
Yes.
he is also connected to well, he said the part of their oath in the Royal Order of the Jesters, it says, I am a jester. What I see here, what I hear here, shall stay here when I leave here. And then they have another motto, mirth is king. And they do this performance, which is a ritual called the Book of the Play. And they actually bow down to call a King Momus. Have you heard of that guy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Momus was like cast out of heaven for being a trickster of the gods. And then they also have this mascot called the Billiken. And this is so weird and creepy. So the Billiken was like part of this 20th century no worry fad that was going around.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen this little guy. Here's Billiken.
Oh, sure. I've got it in my book. In fact,
Oh, okay, good.
everything you're saying here is you couldn't have said it better
So,
myself,
so
to be
I'm on the
honest.
right track then, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Because I wrote this in 2013, so at least, I know something. And here's the St. Louis mascot. I don't know if you see
Mm-hmm.
the Billiken.
Yeah, the official story, he was created by an English teacher, like some female English teacher for this movement you're talking about. But
Uh-huh.
if you actually look at him, he's identical to the Greek god Bez, which is a trickster dwarf god
Oh, yes.
and a protector of the home. He's all like a fat Buddha you put on the top of a doorway. They kind of do the same thing in Egyptian
Yes.
religion with this best god. Yeah.
Yeah, best Egyptian. And also, just before we were coming on, I just like Googled where does clowns come from just for fun and see what would pop up. And I got Ancient Egypt. Clowns were the first recorded in 5th century Egyptian Empire. They wore leopard skin, mask, and imitated Egyptian gods. So that's something we talk a lot about here on this channel. The self-transformative psychodrama of theater. And clowns are a big part of this. And it's a big part of satanic rituals. It's a big part of OTO. It's a big part of sex magic, putting on costumes of Egyptian gods. And then just this little like wiki came up with ancient Greece. And we also talk about the origin of mystery schools and how play acting and theater actually comes from worship of these original gods and goddesses, right?
Mhm.
So you've got clowns in ancient Egypt, clowns in ancient Greece, both connected to mystery schools and play acting, dressing up. Also in Rome, it says they were present, typically bald or pointy hats, medieval Europe, America, and then circuses. So we talk about circuses in connection to monarch mind control sometimes, like the whole circus and the ringmaster.
Mhm.
So that's all I ever knew about like jesters and clowns, but you had so much more, and it just like came together. Like you can't deny it once you watch all of your YouTube and get your great book about it. It's like this is what they look like, demonic clowns. And okay, I didn't want to go here, but Tucker just talked about getting attacked by a demon, Tucker Carlson or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, every time I've had something spooky happen to me, something I couldn't explain, there was always like the feeling or the presence of something mocking me. Does that
Yeah.
make any laughter was always involved, like a weird demonic laughter?
Mhm.
And the feeling that I was being made a fool out of or a joke out of. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very common association with the Nephilim from modern descriptions. It's funny. I'm writing part two right now, volume two, which is called the Now. So
Uh-huh.
volume one's called the History, and like I said, volume one of my book just lays out the biblical narrative of the Nephilim from start to finish, and then it talks about the Royal Order of the Jesters, the secret societies connection, where we get the modern costume of a clown from, and how it's intrinsically linked with secret societies, and then it
Mm.
goes briefly into kind of clown societies, ancient cultures in America, especially native tribal cultures like the Heyoka, and how it's a representation of a thunder god and so forth. But when talking about like the giant bones of America that were kind of discovered in the 1800s, and the mythos and the stories of tribes encountering white-skinned, red-haired, cannibalistic giants. The Nung were described, which the Duwamish people had to deal with in the Northern Plains, as these jokesters, prankster giants that were giant with red hair, white skin, big smiles, but they would play pranks on the people because the people couldn't do anything back to them. But
Mhm.
the pranks were really cruel. They would like pick up the hut and put it on top of a tree. It's kind of like just laugh that the human can't sleep now. Just stupid things like that. So
Yeah.
like just play with the tribe. It's kind of like, what's the tribe going to do? They had a magic cream apparently that made them go invisible, and that would open them up to doing more pranks. But it's like mockery of humanity. Look how pathetic and weak they are compared to what's type of joke, bullying basically.
Mhm.
But then there's another tale. By the way, the Dwarmish people stood up to them and all got murdered brutally, and that's the tale that still goes on today. That you don't mess with them, because it's kind of like if you stand up to these things, they'll be so affronted that a human dared stand up to them. They basically threw young boys into the air and let them slap onto the ground and die, and just pop the heads off the young men. You know what I mean? That's kind of the retribution that the people suffered for standing up to them. The Paiutes dealt with the similar tribes, exact same thing. They called them the CT Car. And the city car, which had the same description, were basically driven underground into a cave, and then the entrance to the cave was blocked and set fire to kill them and smoke them out. But the cave was empty by the time they actually checked. So clearly they're living underground or something in America. But there's another tale from the Inuit culture, and I've just done this one because I'm going through that now in my second book. And they have a demon, which is withered, pale, crooked, long fingers, long limbs, big, horrible smile. It's called the Mahaha.
Mm.
It actually has ha ha
Mahaha.
and Mahaha, yeah.
Inuit
And
Mahaha. I'm gonna look it up right now. Keep
yeah, and
going.
apparently this thing has a horrible laugh. It giggles when it hunts people, and it,
Hmm.
it it tickles them to death. It's some of the things it talks about, but it's basically a horrible.
Did you just say tickles them to death?
It's stories of it tickling people to death, yeah, with its long, horrible, sharp, jagged fingers while giggling. Now imagine
Dude,
a clown-looking monster tickling you to death with the
no,
giant.
check it out because that's my reoccurring childhood nightmare.
Well, there you
Like a
go. So,
laughing, gross mask that tickles me till I can't breathe. And I like wake up. I haven't had that
well,
dream in like 30 years, but I would have it a lot, like probably
hmm.
several times a week. And I was terrified of being t like tickled and touched and of Halloween masks because the mask was going to tickle me to death.
Yeah, well, they have a whole mythos of demons. The shamans of those cultures work with demons for power, and they
Here's a
channel them.
mahaha. Is it
That's
what
one example. Yeah,
artistic?
of a creepy
Yeah.
looking Mahaha, a long limbed, creepy creature with a big smile that giggles. Yeah. But
Yeah.
this is one demon of many. There's many forms of these things. They have their own giant mythos in Inuit. And by Inuit, that covers a broad land, by the way. We're talking Siberia, northern Canada, Alaska, the circle at the top, And they have a lot of horrible, grotesque masks to represent these demons. Shamans channel these demons for power, and they'll tell you that's what they're doing. And they also have a giant mythos called the Tunits, which are basically the offspring of frost giants from the north mating with human women and creating the Dorset culture, which are
Mhm.
these giants. And the Dorset men could like sling walruses over their shoulder like it was nothing. You know what I mean? They were monstrous giant things. And I think the mythos is that the Inuit moved into the lands, killed the giants, and those spirits became the demons that they deal with today. That seems to be what I figured out, and that's the mythos pretty much everywhere else. But that's interesting. You talk about this jokes to like attitude the demons seem to have. It seems to be like a running theme throughout most cultures I look into. They always have this big grotesque wide smile with bulging eyes,
Mhm.
and they have this attitude of mockery behind them. And the demons are infamous for being like that. And the clown is the embodiment of that, mockery at the expense of others. Unless you're talking about the more modern, silly clowns, where it's the fool and the idiot, like they were the ones with the big red noses and the silly floppy hats and stuff. That's more of a modern iteration. But the
Mhm.
original clown from the 1800s. So this is the one that all modern clowns are kind of based off of today in the Western culture. And that was actually introduced quite strangely in 1799. So at this time, there was quite a up and coming actor called Joseph Grimaldi. Now, Grimaldi had always been in the theatre, born and raised in it through his own father, who was an Italian actor as well. And he kind of married into the industry. He married the daughter of the guy who runs the theatre. So Richard Hughes has a daughter called Marie, and he married her, and she basically died at childbirth. It was really a sad time for this actor Joseph Grimaldi. He lost his wife and his child. Apparently, her last words to her father Richard were, "Look after poor Joe. Look after him, please." So Richard went to this brand new showrunner he just hired. He just hired this guy to run the theater for him. Richard was a busy rich man, had other things to deal with, But he hired this son of one of his mates called Charles Dibdin. Now, Charles Dibdin Sr., his mate, was a prominent member of the Leicestershire Freemason Lodge, number 2326, I think it was. And you can find obituaries and odes written to him in the lodge's later iterations of meetings. You can find the minutes of the meetings. I've got them in my book to document all this. But he was a Freemason and quite a well-renowned one. He's very famous for his time. He wrote a lot of songs for the British military that the sailors sung while colonizing India, let's say at the time. They He was a big deal. Like today, we don't know who this guy is, but then he's like everyone knows who Charles Dibdin is. He's like if you're in the industry, you've heard of this dude.
Mhm.
Anyway, he had a son who was also called Charles Dibdin because that's just what they were like back then, just to complicate things. They all named each other after each other continuously. But
Yeah.
his son was given this position of running up this theater just after Joe had lost his wife and son and was given basically he was given the leading roles as like sympathy.
Mhm.
So his father, now ex-father-in-law, said to the new showrunner, "You better give him some leading roles. You better keep him on his feet." So he did. He gave him the head role as lead clown. Now, clowning, as it's traditionally understood, was a part of something called the Commedia dell'arte movement, which developed over like 1,000 years through the medieval period, coming out of the collapse of Rome. That Roman clowning was more like mimicry. They would wear masks to mock generals, kings, leaders, military men, bankers, people of affluence, and they would mimic them. They were mimes, and that's kind of where
Hmm.
the masked comedy comes from. And out of that, there's earlier Greek kind of iterations of it as well. But masks like clowns as we understand them today didn't really exist then. It was just people wearing masks acting silly. Now, there's
Hmm.
always been funny people, even back to Egypt. There's always been funny people. But that's not what a clown is traditionally, that we're talking about today. The red nose, honk honk, silly red wig, multicolored clothed clown. They didn't really exist then. They
Hmm.
only existed when this son of a Freemason decided to change the costume of a clown, which had always been the same for 1,000 years. It used to be plain white servant rags, just servant rags, no
Okay.
color, nothing at all.
Did it have a
Quite,
ruffle around his neck or
it
anything?
did, yeah. That's
Oh,
the
okay.
Elizabeth, the
Like white
Elizabethan,
PJs with a ruffle, it looked like.
yeah, the Elizabethan
Hmm.
trend kind of came. Get
Okay.
a floppy ruffle is a sign of not being rich, because
Yeah.
rich people put starch in their stiff ruffle and it was stiff and hard. But if you couldn't afford the starch, then it was floppy. So it's kind
Oh,
of the joke.
right.
It was a thing of aristocracy to have a stiff ruffle.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so this floppy ruffled Elizabethan servant rag. Earlier iterations, it didn't necessarily have a ruffle, but it was still just plain white servant rags of the
Mhm.
time of the era. And he was the servant of the rich man, and he had his foil, his comedic foil, which was Harlequin. Harlequin was also the servant of the rich man. So two servants of the rich
Like
man. One,
DC Comics, Harley Quinn,
well,
right?
no, this is DC Comics has ripped off and
Okay.
made their character based on who I'm telling you about now. This is
Uh-huh.
where you get Harley Quinn, the baseball bat wearing woman, from. This is what it's based on. So
Okay.
Harley Quinn, let's go back in time here. So there's a pattern. So the Commedia dell'arte movement develops out of a collapsed Roman Empire.
Hmm.
Christendom takes over, and actors are prostitutes. They're dirty people. They
Hmm.
pretend to be something they're not. It's frowned upon to be an actor. So they have to leave Rome and they travel Europe in little groups called the Commedia dell'arte band, and they were basically improv actors who traveled. The first circuses we're talking about here through Europe, they traveled from village to village, put up a quick stage, did a quick improv performance, took money in a hat from people who saw it, whip the stage down, get it on the back of the carriages, move to the next place. And that was their business. That was their livelihood. That's what they did. This
Well,
band. Go ahead, sorry.
do you think they're connected? Well, they were looked down upon because that was connected to paganism directly.
It was more like it's lying, it's being deceitful, and
Okay.
and the stuff that the comedians and actors did was like mockery. It was of the devil to act and behave that way.
Hmm.
Um, at the time, being an actor was on par socially, like being a prostitute. You're for sale. You'll pretend to be anything for money. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's just frowned upon at the culture at the time.
Hmm.
So they kind of had to travel and move and get away from this stuffy, newly Christianized Catholic rule type realm they were living in. Basically, this is the official narrative anyway. So they banded together and they traveled Europe and they made it all across Europe, east, south, northwest. Even as far as Russia to the peninsulas and the bottom end of Portugal. They were everywhere. And they did it for 1,000 years. And they developed their art and their craft, and they had what were called stock characters. And a stock character basically just represents something anyone could recognize, no matter where you're from. So everyone knows what a soldier is. Everyone knows what a rich man is.
A
Everyone knows,
princess.
yeah, I think, basic characters that everyone would know.
Right.
Because they're going to different countries with different languages and different cultures, but they had these things called stock characters, and they were all clowns. If you want to say a clown is just someone who's a comedian or a funny character, they were all funny characters. That's the point, and it was a comedy show. And clown kind of developed out of being this servant, and he was called Pedrolino in the Italian tradition. And Britain called him a clown when it got to Britain finally and became popular there, because it's just a colloquial term for like clodhopper or fool. And so it just changed because out of the two servants, Harlequin and Pedrolino, Pedrolino was the slow to get the point dimwit fool,
Okay.
and Harlequin was the quick-witted, snappy, fast-talking. You know,
Right.
that's his comedy. He was like sharp, like a demon. But Pedrolino was slow, like an idiot, and that's the comedy. Them two bouncing off
Oh,
of each
okay.
other. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
Harlequin didn't appear until about the late 1500s, coming out of the Dark Ages into the Enlightenment period.
Uh-huh.
And you'll find the reason he was added as a stock character, so this is Harlequin, is because no matter where this troop went, they kept encountering a specific character in the mythology of each folk tradition of every country in Europe. It's called the Wild Man. And
Hmm.
everyone knew what the Wild Man was. So they decided to incorporate that into the show. Because no matter where they went, people would know what the Wild Man is. And the Wild Man are basically club wielding giants who eat people, who are just demonic monsters. And they have a band of wild little demons that follow them around everywhere,
Hmm.
and they live in tribes and in the forests, and they're basically hairy, multicolored, hairy beasts with a club.
Yeah.
So they're basically the European flavor of Nephilim. Now, in
Okay.
Europe, it's cold. So I think the Nephilim there developed fur to
Okay.
acclimatize. You go to other places and some of them are completely naked in like
Uh-huh.
India because it's very hot, or in Australia. But this version of Nephilim seems to be hairy in the north. And think of like Bigfoot, for example, something
Right.
like that. But they're always like depicted as very colorful. So the early first prototype Harlequin cast, he wore a white suit that was loose with multicolored patches all over his body. And that
Mhm.
kind of slowly developed into a skin tight leotard over 102 years with diamonds, multicolored diamonds everywhere. And that's the
Mhm.
Harlequin pattern. We call it the Harlequin pattern. That's what it's named after. And he
Mhm.
has this stick, like the club of the giant, and he called it the slapstick. And he would
Mm.
slap the stage and the scene would change. He'd have magic powers because he is the demon. That's what he represents. And he had demonic powers. He could talk to the audience and no one else could hear him on stage. He could like break that fourth wall. He could do backflips and somersaults. He almost seemed like he was flying across the stage, because he was also kind of mixed not only with the brutal wild man of the northern area of Europe, but it was also mixed with the Mediterranean mythos of like Hermes and Dionysus, who has the thyrsus, the stick, or the two
Deuces.
snakes winding the caduceus and the thyrsus. Yeah, so thyrsus was Dionysus with a pine cone, and the caduceus was like Mercury.
Mm.
It's now the modern medicine symbol,
Mhm.
But basically, they kind of mixed those two ancient gods with northern giants together and created Harlequin,
Okay.
and he was the demonic comedy nasty character. He would do rude things with his stick, you know what I mean? He was brash and brutal and rude and quick-witted and smart and intelligent and outright he was meant to be a demon. And I document it in the book. This is well understood. He is a demon. That's the
Mhm.
point of his character. And he
Mhm.
doesn't care about his boss, the rich man. He doesn't really do what he says. He's like a rogue. And the comedy would come from Harlequin stealing the rich man's daughter, Columbine, and just running away. And then the rich man and the clown, or Pedrolino, would chase after Harlequin and the daughter. And then it'd be like a Looney Tunes mad chase scene for like an hour. But ridiculous things happen to each other, and then they'd suddenly just magically be healed for the next scene and do more funny stuff. It was like just ridiculous, ridiculous stuff. But that was the comedy, that was the show, and it never really changed for like 300 years. But for some reason, in 1799, in the British version of what we call pantomime, which is the version of this son of a Freemason decided to change the costume of Pedrolino, the clown, from plain white to multicolored, insane frills and patterns. It was just odd. It was such an odd change. But when you look at it, you've noticed that Harlequin, by like the 18th century, wasn't really as witty as he used to be. He wasn't really as demonic as he used to be.
Mhm.
He seemed a bit more fancy, a bit of a fancy romantic, a hopeless romantic, a doting, lovesick fool. And the British clown was kind of taking over as the role of the quick witted demon.
Mhm.
So they gave a costume change and basically made the clown similar to Harlequin in costume design. But this time, the costume design is modeled after Indian demons instead. So not the European flavor, which Harlequin was. It seems like, and I only know this through my own research, and
East
I show the
Indian,
pictures.
right? Not Native
It,
American.
no, yeah, the continent of India. Yeah, let's,
Right.
let's say that. Yeah, no, we're not talking about.
Because I did
Yeah,
want to circle back when you're done explaining that and talk about it, and that's Native American. So,
yeah, we can get into that, and there is
okay.
there is reasonings for that, so we'll get into
Right.
that. But just to finalize the story of where the modern costume of a clown comes from, it
Hmm.
comes out of this old tradition, the Commedia dell'Arts, and a Freemason's son made the costume change in the 1799, the 1800s, and we know it's modeled after an Indian Rakshasa demon because Charles Dibdin Senior was always moving back and forth to India. His brother Thomas was a member of the East India Company.
Is
He was
this is that like something like that?
That's a Rakshasa demon. Yeah,
Okay.
that's one
That looks
example
like
of
a
a Rakshasa.
clown.
That's one example of a Rakshasa. If you type in um, Rakshasa Thailand temple, just type that in.
Okay. With an R.
Just Rakshasa, as it sounds,
Uh,
R-A K-S-H-A, Rakshasa with an S-A at the end, another S-A, and just Thailand temple. And you'll find that this is their slightly different artistic flavor and style. And it's these ones specifically the modern costume of a clown was first based upon.
oh.
And well, you can see it. It's a very visual thing I'm talking about here. And obviously on the video, I do kind of
Yes,
show
that's
this all.
why I recommend your YouTube series because we're not doing it justice, but and we don't have enough
Okay.
time. Is
So
that
that's one example. Yeah, perfect. So on temples, you got a lot of smaller versions of them with their arms up and they're holding up the pillars like this.
uh-huh.
And you may see many examples of that if you just type in Rakshasa, Thailand temple, demon, or something like that. You'll find one of them will come up eventually, and it looks like there's loads of them in a row, and they're all holding up their arms, and they're all holding up the temple.
Hmm.
You got it, yeah,
Like that.
perfect. So that right there is exactly what Joseph Grimaldi's first brand new costume for his leading role was dressed in.
Oh.
He was dressed in that costume. So if you
And
type in Joseph Grimaldi,
okay.
and you will see the picture. He's doing a handstand, and he's looking up, smiling. It's a drawing, and he's doing a handstand.
Okay. Joseph Grimaldi images. I don't see a handstand, but I see like this guy.
Yeah, so there he is in his later, older years. So if can I share the screen with you? I can probably show you quickly myself, to be
If you
honest.
know how, I'm so bad at this, but if you know what you're doing, please.
Yeah, I can definitely do this. Just give me a second. Let me get my folder up so I'm not
Okay.
just clicking get air. So desktop, and I've got. Let's go to.
So is this also connected to like Tibetan demons and Shambhala and because I'm thinking those I mean they have those weird elongated eyes but they do have the big bright colors and the mouth and the teeth and like all do you think that's part of it too?
Yes, it's pretty much all of them.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll just show. I have a folder here called top examples of Nephilim. I made it a while ago for another podcast, so there's quite enough stuff in here for me just to give you some brief overviews of things.
Okay, perfect.
So I'll share this with you quickly. If you just click the share, so if you go onto Zoom and at the bottom there's a green box that says share.
Hmm.
If you click that and say allow anybody to share screen, I should just be able to do it. You just have to tick a box.
One participant can share at a time, multiple.
Yeah, multiple.
Okay.
And I should be able. There we go. And if I just do the whole thing,
Awesome.
can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. So in this finder here, so this you had the Thailand temple up there,
Uh-huh.
the Rakshasa, and here's another version of it. This is the Kala Sung Sang demon. So can we see this
Oh.
one?
And he even
This
has
is
checkerboard bloomers on.
Yeah, this is in Bali, and it's a
Okay.
Rakshasa demon. It's the same thing as you saw in Thailand, there in India.
Yeah.
But this one's called the Kala Sung Sang, which basically means upside down demon. And it has the red lips, wide smile, wild bulging eyes, and the checkerboard thing. Now,
Mhm.
you also show the Thailand temples, which I don't have a photo of here, I don't think, but you saw what they were on there. That's
Yeah.
basically the exact same costume as this, which he was dressed in for the first time.
Ew, that's so evil looking.
Yeah, and this is Joseph Grimaldi, and he was even painted in the same style
Yeah.
as the Kala Sung Sang demon, as you see here.
I don't know if you had this show in England, but we had one called Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nickelodeon.
That rings a bell. Yeah, from my childhood. Yeah.
Millennials will definitely remember this, but one of their staple monsters was this evil clown, and it always creeped me out.
Absolutely. So if I just share with you, let's put this in slideshow mode.
Okay.
There we go, and I'll make the screen bigger so it's taking up the whole thing.
Okay.
There we go. So if I go through this, these are some of the early clowns after Joseph Grimaldi who modeled their costume off of his because it was such a
Uh-huh.
hit. People had never seen a clown dressed like this before. It was unheard of. It was
Uh-huh.
prior to this, it was plain white. And now it's this monstrous thing because it's modeled after the Rakshasa demons of India. So
Uh-huh.
the original Harlequin was modeled after the European flavor, and then clown was later modeled after the Indian version. This is another example of a Rakshasa. This is disclosure. This is an AI image somebody made for me as an example.
Uh-huh.
This is more likely what the Nephilim would have looked like. This is my example. But I know this based off of the real artwork, like this, for example. This is a demon which was in Sri Lanka. The
Hmm.
mythos behind this demon is that he was born to a queen, but the king saw it and said, "That is not my child." So clearly the queen had been impregnated by some other means, and she had this child, which was a half serpent human monster.
Hmm.
And he basically rejected the queen and the child being born ate the mother's dead body because they were kind of thrown into a pit. And he came out of the pit as he got older after feasting on dead bodies, and came out and basically cannibalized and destroyed the entire kingdom, as revenge for his father for rejecting him. But he was never his father to begin with. This is clearly the product of a fallen angel mixing with a human woman to try and legitimately insert through the kingship, through the lineage of bloodlines, their own offspring.
Yeah.
But it obviously went terribly wrong. And this thing is always depicted holding two people in its hands, and a bunch of
For
mass.
snacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically eating it with this giant grin and bulging eyes and serpents for hair.
Yeah.
Here we have the fighter con, which is I think is it Taiwan? It's Taiwan, I think. And they have this. It's basically the Day of the Dead festival. It's the version. These represent the ghosts of the dead,
Looks
ghosts,
like Ghostface from Scream, kind of.
disembodied spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have big, horrible smiles with these clown-like complexions. This is in Spain.
Oh
This
wow.
is one of their traditions. This is Red Nose Day, a tradition we do every year in the West. And you have to wonder why when you start thinking about this theory now. They
Yeah.
say it's to raise money for kids and people dying children in Africa, but I'm starting to think it's maybe a ritual of some kind. And this is in Africa. This is a mating ritual. The men take a lot of drugs, stand in a line and chatter their teeth and make their eyes really wide. So they're trying to give a wide smile and big bulging eyes with this red tasseled head look and this clownish look because
Uh-huh.
they're trying to emulate something that they consider a beauty standard. And this is
Uh-huh.
to attract women. You've got the dragon face changes of China. This is another Raksha mask from Sri Lanka. This is what a
Uh-huh.
human dragon hybrid would look like. These are the Nephilim, and this
Hmm.
is what the clowns are based on. So this is a very special one. This is actually in the Kimberley region of Australia. So this is called a Wangina. Now, a Wangina is the offspring of the rainbow serpents. And the rainbow serpents sent their children down to teach mankind how to build things. So these are the Nephilim. These are the offspring of fiery, multicolored dragons. And
Hmm.
they look like clowns. This is a clown. This is an ancient depiction of an ancient entity from Australia.
Hmm.
Why does it literally have pom-poms on its chest, a multicolored polka dot
Right.
cloak? It has a white ruffle. It has a red afro. Okay.
It
It's
almost looks like if you put a gray alien with a clown. That's what you would get.
exactly. Well, it's actually an owl. They're linked intrinsically with
He,
owls as well.
he looks a
Very,
little.
very odd. But then if we go over, so you have this depiction here, and these are painted all over the rock walls of these caves in the Kimberley region. You see hundreds of depictions of these Wanginas. But then if you go over to Greece, they have their own mythology of something called a Gorgon. Now, a Gorgon is the
Morgan, that's
offspring.
from Stranger Things.
Well, yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and I guess it's named after this ancient mythos. But a gorgon is Medusa. Medusa was a
Oh,
gorgon,
uh-huh.
quite
Okay.
famously, and she's always depicted as like a snake-haired green snake woman. But that's actually a very modern, bastardized image. That's not actually what she looked like at all. It's a very modern reinterpretation. What she looked like was a lot like a Wangina. Pale white skin, like a
Mm.
Rakshasa, big grin with the bulging thing, tongue sticking out, and red hair with white skin. This is what Medusa looked like.
Oh.
And Medusa, like this here, another
Whoa, that is
depiction.
like exactly like a clown.
So this is what, and she didn't have snakes for hair. She didn't
Hmm.
have a snake body. She had legs. Okay. She had this big wide grin, red
Wow.
lips, white skin, tongue sticking out. This is the Rakshasas of India. It's the same creature, just on a different continent with a different mythology surrounding it, but it's the same creature. If
Reminds me
you
of Kali too.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You see, well, this is what I do. You see a similar thread across all cultures. They
Yeah.
all encountered this same creature with these specific aesthetics. And I mean, for example, Athena, it's said that Perseus killed Medusa by cutting off her head and turning her to stone. Oh, there's a lot of mythology behind it. But he basically gifted Medusa's head to Athena. And she then wore Medusa's head on her chest like a tiny little medallion because Athena's a giant goddess, an angel, basically. And she wears it for good luck. And a lot of soldiers of Athens wear what's called a gorgonian, or this face, on their shields as protection. Anyway, there's a famous relief of her on a piece of pottery with an owl there, because she's known as the goddess of wisdom with the Sophia owl.
Mhm.
She has this on her chest to represent Medusa.
Whoa.
This is a clown.
Medusa, all OG Medusa looks exactly like a Bozo the Clown or some cartoon.
Exactly. This is what she really looks like. So this whole snakehead depiction is a really modern lie. She looked nothing like that. She
Wow.
looked like this. And this is what you find when you get really to the roots of these places. You find that there are cultures all over the earth. I mean, here's a random tribe in Papua New Guinea,
Hmm. With the red
and,
nose even.
and they wipe the skin up and give themselves a red nose because they're trying to emulate something, the
Is it
spirits of
because
the
they're
dead.
just chowing down on raw flesh and like it gets on them?
No, they would have had big red lips, like a imagine because snakes, for example, they
Uh-huh.
can dislocate their jaws to eat
Oh.
their prey. So they
Oh.
have snakes have big, wide maws. Like there's a big
Like this
line
guy.
connect. Exactly, snakes have big, wide mouths like that, and
I got all the discount Halloween masks. They were like a dollar.
but we have to understand as well, they're mixed with humans. So
Oh,
imagine a reptile mouth with big human lips. It'd look like
okay.
a big red smile. They would look terrifying. A
Did
lot
you
like
see?
the book here behind you, like that's pretty much. And it's not like they were smiling all the time. It's
Yeah.
that it just looks like that from the front because of the way
Oh,
the mouth is shaped. It's just by virtue of them. But there is this aspect of they were cannibals, so maybe it's like a baby eating spaghetti bolognese. They get smeared all over them, that type of thing. But I think more realistically, they would have just had big red lips like Medusa here. Um,
did you see Kim Kardashian's Halloween costume?
she was a lizard, I believe, wasn't she? Yeah,
Albino reptile, pale
exactly.
skin. All that's missing is the red hair, but this is like fully alien or reptilian DNA almost, right?
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but a lot of these people believe themselves have bloodlines going back to the Nephilim. That's where you get the royal blood idea from. These people having the divine right to rule is having angel blood in them because they are descendants of this. So I do believe these power families think they have some kind of connection to all of this. Again, in modern circuses, when they first were coming around, you find they always drew clowns with these big, horrible, wide grins that are not
It's
human.
terrifying.
I
And
know.
P.T.
Yeah.
Barnum actually was a Freemason, and his motto was the same motto. I don't know if he got it from Crowley or Crowley got it from him. I don't know the origin of that, but they would both say that there's a sucker born every minute. So
Okay,
they,
well, the story behind that is
oh, okay, go ahead.
so Phineas Taylor Barnum, he's known as like he created the big top tent three ring circus. He brought the freak show into the circus. He was that guy.
Okay.
But prior to joining the circus, when he was 60 years old, he used to be like a charlatan con man businessman. And he had his own little like museum of curiosities type thing where he would just make stuff up about the things he'd found and people would travel to come and see them. So he said he had a real mermaid at one point, and all he did was sew the head of a monkey onto a fish body. But
Yeah.
people
Or
came
please
for
believe
the
it or not, right?
yeah. People came for the spectacle because of the advertisements, but what they got was this nonsense. But he
Mhm.
also claimed to have the body of a real giant.
Mhm.
But what he had done, he had heard there was some other guy out there claiming the same thing and making money. So he copied it and made a hoax body, like a hoax giant's body, like mummified. And then he said, I've got a real giant, come and see it. But the guy who had supposedly the real body tried to sue P.T. Barnum for stealing his business.
Hmm.
Right. So Phineas Taylor Barnum had the hoax body, and he got the
Uh,
inspiration from hearing about this guy who supposedly had a real giant's body. But so the whole thing was so ridiculous that apparently the prosecutor said there's a sucker born every minute. The judge threw the whole case out. He didn't even want to deal with it. He's like, this is just absolutely insanity. Like, what am I even dealing with here? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
type of things. But I think it was
I
quite
don't got
famous.
time for this. Yeah. I'm too
I
old
think
for
it's
this.
yeah. I think it was the prosecutor who said that famous phrase. There's a sucker
Okay.
born every minute to
Well, I know
describe
Crowley
this
said it
situation.
too. Yeah.
Probably got it from this whole situation, to be honest. And PC Barnum is quite infamous. Like I said, he was a bad person. He was not a good person.
Really?
His history is terrible. He is a terrible human being who exploits people for money and power. And he's also a member of the Oddfellows, funnily enough, a Freemasonic offshoot whose symbol,
Uh-huh.
coincidentally, is three interlocking rings. And P.T. Barnum invented the
Oh,
three ringed circus.
right.
So there
And
you
if
go.
you don't know, Oddfellows also go on to be a lot of funeral directors. So they're
and,
working.
and presidents and
Yeah.
generals and prime ministers and actors. Charlie
Yeah.
Chaplin was a member as well. Yeah, they have incredibly powerful members in that fraternity and organization. World leaders, kings. King George the Fourth was a member.
Oh,
It's
wow.
really odd, like kings and prime ministers and senate members and leaders of countries are members, but also actors
Hmm.
and entertainers. It's a really odd mix of people. Maybe there's no real difference between somebody playing the role of the president or playing the role of somebody on stage. Maybe they're all actors and that's why they're part of the same guild. Who
That's
knows?
the way I lean towards is it's
Yeah,
all theater for real.
absolutely. But you find circuses around this period, they developed a style. And it turns out all the early circuses of America, you have to understand, traditionally, these shows in Britain were done in theaters with, let's say, Joseph Grimaldi dressed like a clown. In
Mhm.
America, they couldn't be stationary. There was no business for it. They had to travel. So the railroads were being laid and they were traveling up and down the country with traveling circuses. Stationary theaters kept burning down for some reason and they just weren't once the villagers seen the show, they don't really want to go again. You know what I mean? So they always had to move to keep business going. So
Right.
they invented the big top tent and they worked together and kind of made up this whole thing. But you find they were all run by Freemasons, every last one of them. And
Uh-huh.
it's like 10 circuses led by Freemasons all came together at once and put on a giant, massive spectacle with like 1,000 cast members. And they called this show King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba because Freemasons were
Well, isn't
obsessed
that
with
Freemasonic right there?
yeah, exactly. They're obsessed with
Yeah.
King Solomon, aren't they? And building his temple, and they have this giant show put on.
Mhm.
And you'll find when you actually break down a circus and its symbolism. So remember, every costume for this show was created by the same companies, Henderson Arms Company. They don't exist anymore, but they made all the aprons and costumes and medallions for Freemasonic rituals and lodges. So they made all the costumes for this show. All the artwork was created by Rossi Calalfi, a famous London artist Freemason. Everything was Freemasonic led and run. All the circuses were Freemasonic. And they put on this massive show and it ran all up and down the country. I think it even traveled to Europe as well. It was a big deal. And when you actually look at a circus and you realize something, you have the ringleader of a circus, the
Yeah.
ringmaster, shall we say, and
Yeah.
he wears this black top hat, doesn't he, and a riding crop.
Oh,
And,
exactly.
and they say the riding crop is a throwback to the British circuses, the original circuses, the original British circus, which, by the way, Charles Dibdin Sr. invented. He created the first thing called a royal circus. He used the word circus first. And
Hmm.
who did he team up with? Richard Hughes, the guy who owned that theater I was telling you about, who made Joseph Grimaldi famous. So they're all connected here, and obviously all Freemasons. Now, prior to that, someone called Philip Astley, an ex general, had his own thing, and he didn't call it a circus. He called it like an amphitheater. And it was basically just horse tricks. He would stand on the back of a horse that would run around in a circle and do backflips and handstands and all sorts of things. And then that developed into the Royal Circus, which was Charles Dibdin's thing, which got a bit more grander and a bit bigger. That's where clowns started to first come in as
Hmm.
entertainers to in between shows. And then that riding crop horse riding aesthetic went to America into the traveling big top circuses. But then that's the official story. That's what we're supposed to understand. But when you actually look at it a bit deeper and you look at Freemasonic lodges, the only person who's allowed to wear a black top hat in a lodge is the leader, the grand worshipful master.
Hmm.
No one else is allowed to wear a hat because it represents the crown of the king, specifically Solomon. So the black top hat represents the crown of Solomon.
Mm-hmm.
So the ringleader is King Solomon in a circus. And what does King Solomon quite famously in throughout Jewish traditions is known for is building the temple
Mm-hmm.
by using a magic ring given to him by angels to
Mm-hmm.
control demons.
Right.
And he would make the demons build the temple for him with his magic signet ring. Well, the ring master or the ring leader is King Solomon orchestrating the clowns to put on the ritual. It's just analog for the King Solomon
Oh,
story.
I get what you're saying.
So the clowns are the
Perfectly. I
standing.
mean, this makes
Yeah.
100% sense. Um, the ring master also in Monarch mind control is, can be the handler, right?
Yeah. He's
A
the
medical,
shaman. He is a
right.
shaman of the modern age. And that you'll find a lot through my books as well. My research, you find every these folk traditions. The first of all, they have their representations of demons. But then they
Oh,
also every folk tradition has a shaman who channels them. And traditionally, a lot of these shamans wear hats, big
mhm.
brimmed hats. It's a very common motif. So it's kind of it's a tool. It's a funneling energy channeling tool of some kind. The Hat Man is quite an infamous demon as well in the shadow people realm. People encounter the Hat
Batman.
Man. Yeah, you should look
Yes.
into that one. That's terrifying.
He's one of
Um,
the spooky videos that we come across. So if you take too much Benadryl, you will see Hat Man,
yes,
right?
I interviewed the guy who made that video.
Oh, really? Okay.
Cryptic Candy, yeah. I saw the same thing and I was blown away because it ties in a lot with my research. It's called Ariel, the land where you go when you take too much Benadryl. Basically, it's the realm of the Hat Man. He runs the whole show
Oh,
and he
wow.
has his shadow demons with him. But shadow entities and the Hat Man ringleader of the shadow entities is a very old tale for most of the paranormal community, way before the Benadryl stuff even broke. And I think you've noticed all the shamans dressed like the Hat Man, basically.
Mhm.
So maybe it has something to do with channeling and orchestrating rituals that bring demons forward, summon the Nephilim in some way. And not only that, but dressing like demons also seems to channel them in some way. So it's
Wow.
all kind of ancient witchcraft through and through. I mean, you have a famous example of the Hat Man channeling shaman is Baron Samedi from the Haitian Vodou culture.
Yep.
And he obviously has the snake around him with the black top hat, and he always has a cigar in his mouth and he's drinking
He's
rum,
he's the
and
worshipful master of the lodge on the other side, they say.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you find Haitian Vodou culture is a mashup of Vodun from West
Hmm.
Africa kind of animistic shamanism, we'll call
Hmm.
it, mixed with French Catholicism and French Freemasonry, all kind of mashed together into one thing. So you find a Vodou culture uses a lot of Freemason symbols in their sigils while summoning demons, and they
Yeah.
chalk the face up, wipe the face up, do these chants, and dress in a certain way to let the spirits in their body. And that's the general trend for all these cultures all around the earth.
Look at that.
Here's India, for example. They're trying to channel one of their primordial gods.
Uh-huh.
Here is in Portugal, they call this the Kratos, and they say these are demons. We're dressing like demons, and the Western cultures have this weird view. They kind of believe they're dressing this way to scare away bad spirits for winter,
Hmm.
but all these other cultures, like this one, they dress this way to let the demon in their body. Now they
Right.
can't both be right. What are you doing? Are you scaring them away, or are you letting them in your body when you dress this way?
Right.
I'm going to go with the older culture. You're
Yeah,
letting them in. You're letting
we're
them in. You're not scaring them away. Here's another African example. This is the cookery of Bulgaria. They have this is the wild man I was telling you about earlier that they're trying to represent here. They
uh-huh.
have the party hat with the pom poms, quite a
Wow.
common look there. Yeah, they're representing demons here, winter
So
demons.
across all these cultures, their representation of an evil spirit or a demon looks exactly like Bozo the clown
Something
or
like a clown.
something like that.
They
Yeah.
have clown aesthetics. They
But
have similar features to what we have designed in the West, which we call a clown. But the clown in the West, we have to understand it is an amalgamation, it's a caricature
uh-huh.
of Nephilim features. So they've
Right.
looked at all these other cultures around the earth and
Uh-huh.
they've made our own version of their costumes. We call it a clown. We're supposed to believe it's a bit of fun for the kids, but the occultists who made this costume know it's a tool for channeling demons.
Hmm.
We're not supposed to know that. It's
It's
hidden. It's
Right.
hidden, occult. It's an occult method of channeling demons publicly without the public realizing it. Esoterically, what they want people to interpret the clown as is harmless fun.
Hmm.
Sorry, exoterically. Esoterically, the hidden meaning that we're not supposed to know and only the initiated know is that it represents the Nephilim. So this is what we've kind of uncovered, and you find they're pushing clown fashion on us since 2023.
Clown
Um,
World, they call it now, right?
Clown core, yeah, and you find Elle during Fashion Week at the start of January last year. The catwalks are full of people dressed like clowns, quite ridiculously, and
Yeah.
it's what you see on the catwalk is a bit extreme, but
Uh-huh.
this style trickles down into the outlet stores in a watered down way eventually.
Yeah.
And then so they're getting us to dress like clowns and think it's a legitimate fashion choice because they're trying to get us to be more willing, open vessels to let the Nephilim come through. Because this ancient knowledge basically is playing off a simple principle: as above, so below.
Hmm.
So if what you mimic in the physical is creating a mirror of something in the spiritual. Now, if you try and look like something in this realm that exists in the spirit realm, you're creating a connection to it and therefore a channel. It can
Hmm.
get through into our physical realm, into your body. So these shamans dress this way because they want it in their body.
Hmm.
They're doing it saying, possess me. I want stuff. I want knowledge. I want power. I want information.
Hmm.
I want to be able to be stabbed and not bleed, all these type of things. If you come in my body and give me these powers, I will give you blood, meat, alcohol, smoking, whatever your vice is, demon, I will give it to you.
Hmm.
I will drink those things and eat these things because you can experience that through my body,
Hmm.
through my senses. This is what
And
possession is all about. And
and this
it's kind
is
of that's the deal. It's a transactional deal. So this is what these tribes do it for. Here's the Mudmen of Papua New Guinea again. Back to the fighter con, their examples. Look at that big Joker grin right there. And these are representing the spirits of the dead. Here's an old mask of the Rakshasa demons of Sri Lanka. Here's the Rangda, the demon queen of Sri Lanka, with the tongue sticking out, long fingers. This is a lot like the Mahaha we were talking about in the Inuit culture there. She has similar aesthetics. Here's the Shriners. So this is a Freemasonic
oh,
offshoot.
oh, look
They
at that
all
thing.
they all have a clown sect. Every Shriner organization in America have a section within each shrine that have to dress like a clown, and they go and entertain dying children in hospitals. How nice of them, right? Well, why does a Middle Eastern themed subsect of a Solomonic Freemasonic order have anything to do with dressing like a Western clown? What has the
Right.
Middle East got to do with Western clowns? It doesn't make any sense until you consider everything I'm telling you right now. It's a tool for channeling demons. And why is the highest order? That's terrifying.
That's
Why
the
is the
Are You Afraid of
highest?
the Dark Nickelodeon song.
I remember that. I'm getting flashback nostalgic memories of horror. But why is a the Royal Order of the Jesters? Why is that the pinnacle of Freemasonry? It's
Right.
so odd, isn't it? Until you understand what you explained earlier and what I'm explaining to you now. It's because they know something. They know what this truly means and what it represents to dress this way.
Hmm.
This is again going
Hey,
back
look at
to
that thing.
the cookery of Bulgaria. They're dressing in the wild man again with the big wide grin, the serpentine look. It's a
Hmm.
dragon hybrid of some kind. This is in China. This is in Sri Lanka again. Um, yeah, these are the Rakshasas in Thailand. This is their version of it. There's the Wangina painted on the rock walls of the Kimberley regions of Australia. And there's a modern clown next to it.
Right.
We have modeled what we call a clown off of these things. We're just not supposed to know that. But make no mistake, that Wangina is the offspring of a rainbow serpent from heaven. It is a dragon human hybrid. So that's what clowns are based off of. That's where the Nephilim get their clown-like features.
Right.
That's where they get them from. They get the white skin from their mother, and they get the multicolored patterned skin everywhere else on their body from the snakes, from the serpent gene, because snakes are very
Oh,
colorful
snake
creatures.
scales look kind of like a harlequin pattern a little bit, don't
They
they?
do. Scales look like that too. You're right. And also, the serpents and reptiles are just very colorful creatures. And
Hmm.
so are clowns. And that's what the clown costume represents: serpent skin. Their
Oh.
faces seem to be white more predominantly. The big
Hmm.
red mouth is because they have wide lipped mouths. So it looks like they have a huge red smile. It's very weird.
Hmm.
The slit pupil is a predator symbol. Predators have
Yes.
slit pupils, reptiles have slit pupils, and clown
Right.
makeup often shows a slit pupil. I think the mask you showed me earlier had the slit pupil on it as well. A big giant slit. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're predators, because they're reptilian in nature. The big red afro is just because they have red hair. Most descriptions of Nephilim all have red hair. Even the skulls, the elongated skulls we find, still have
Mhm.
red hair attached to them.
Mhm.
And you'll find clowns often have big foreheads. They wear like a cone cap to make the head look taller and
Yeah.
longer.
Oh, yeah. They have like the bald front part
Yeah,
and
exactly. Because they're
then
trying to
the.
accentuate the elongated skull. They also
Oh,
have high brow ridges painted on in black sometimes, and
yeah.
then they shade it all in blue. And when
Yeah.
they close their eyes, it looks like they have big blue glowing eyes. That's another common trait you find.
Right.
Everything about a clown costume is accentuating in a caricatured, cartoonish way
What about
Nephilim features.
the big feet?
Giants. It's because they're
Oh,
giants.
okay. Okay.
Big gloves because they were giants walking around on stilts because they are giants originally.
Yeah.
Tiny hats, tiny umbrellas, tiny teacups, tiny dogs because they're giants in comparison to these normal everyday human objects. It's all just a caricature. It's a joke. It's a remake image. It's a Western version of the Nephilim features by these other cultures all around the earth. This is what they actually would have looked like. This is a Rakshasa demon
Okay.
again from India. These are the masks they wear in the rituals. White
That.
skin, bulging eyes, big red lip smiles, and sharp teeth. They are a dragon human hybrid. And all the cultures that channel them. Here's a Hatman example. This is a shaman,
Uh-huh.
a Madang of Korea. And she will be hired by rich people to channel demons so they can talk to the demon and get advice from them. And it's a prerequisite that once she's finished the ritual, she stabs herself and cuts herself to prove that she's not going to die or bleed. So the demon is in her. She has to do it to prove that.
Oh,
Okay. That's what those ceremonial blades are for. And they take it very seriously. It's not a joke to these guys. You know what I mean? And this is just a few images compiled from other cultures all around the earth that have represented these. The black and white fractal pattern designs are a very common motif. It's also very common in the snake kingdom. Um, Here we go. Some snakes, for example, with black and white lines and more
that.
Rakshas hybrids
Yeah.
there. You've got
And
the
the totem
totem
poles
poles,
too. Yeah.
white skin, red lips, red nose. These are
Ew.
Tibetan spirits of the dead. Again, here again, back in India again, representing the demon queen and the demon king. Here's Rangda, the demon queen again in Bali.
Yeah.
That's a clown, but just a very hyper stylized version. Here's the dragon that fights the demon queen. So
Hmm.
these are the parents. These are the dragon parents. These are the human dragon hybrids. See the difference?
Yeah.
So this is supposed to be a dragon that
Uh-huh.
fights with one of their children,
Okay.
the demon queen. So this is the Nephilim fighting their own parents. The Book of Enoch talks about this. So it's the same story found. Again, this is Papua New Guinea. Here's another Raksha mask, very terrifying thing. This is another Rangda, the demon queen. Modern clowns, again, modeled after that Indian style.
Yeah.
These are the Selknam tribes of South America, right at the tip of South America. And they are practically extinct now, this tribe, but this is how they used to dress to represent the spirits during initiation rituals for young men to become
Hmm.
men.
Hmm.
And they used to dress this way to scare them, and they are spirits. They represent the demons in the other realm. Because this is kind of what they look like now in disembodied form. They've got this more ethereal, weird looking, gesterish style to them. But when they were physical, they looked like I showed you there. Here's a tribe in Papua New Guinea, red nose, red
Hmm.
feathered headdress. These are the generals, so the leaders of old armies from, I think this is, I'm losing it now. It all starts to blend into one.
But there's just so many examples
Yeah,
of what
there
you're
are,
talking about.
there's that Sri Lanka demon eating a human leg there.
Yeah.
Again, that's an AI representation of what I'm talking about. Not real, but everything else is real. Just
Uh-huh.
disclosure there. Nothing else has been AI'd. Another spirit of the dead there.
Oh, look at that guy.
Another one of those generals I was telling you about with the slit
Mhm.
pupils, red lips, multicolored patterns, and Joseph Grimaud there to top it off. So they're just my few examples I have from a folder I chucked together months ago, very quickly, just to send to somebody who needed some images. But I have thousands of these compiled now. I mean, I could probably find it very quickly. Give me 1 second. Let's just back that up.
Okay.
Let's go to.
Well, while you're looking for that, let's talk about Native Americans again and the giants because over here we are uh, discovering that there was lots of giant bones found in North America, and
Mhm.
they wanted to keep that under wraps. And so they kind of said, well, these are dinosaurs, and they had the Smithsonian, and they were like taking all of this evidence and fossils of giants and storing it at the Smithsonian
Yes, they
and
were.
making up the cover story that we're finding, fossils of dinosaurs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, again, I have a full chapter on that in my book, talking
Oh,
about the red-haired giants of America and the bones, and
hmm
talking about the Bigfoot mythos as well.
hmm
And yeah, it seems like in the 1800s, giant skeletons were just being uncovered everywhere in America.
hmm
Like non-stop archaeological discoveries of giant bones, or especially in the mounds, which were everywhere as well at that time. And
hmm
they were just uncovering just giant after giant after giant, and they had massive skulls, really thick, not like humans, and they had like double rows of teeth, so very wide smiles, like two sets going both ways. And they were like ranging from like 7 foot tall to like 15 foot tall, and it just got a bit out of hand.
hmm
But you'll find wherever very credible archaeologists discovered these bones, these aren't just wacko weirdos who says, I found a giant in my garden, come check it out. These
hmm
were credible archaeologists of the time who were working for universities and had no reason to lie or anything. They would discover these things and report it to the authorities, to the correct official authorities through the government, which would go through the Smithsonian, with true intentions that we have this amazing discovery. And while they're waiting for the Smithsonian to turn up, you'd find they'd like do interviews with local newspapers, and the local newspapers would document quotes from these archaeologists and say this is like the most amazing thing we've ever seen. Like, we don't know what's going on here, and it's like the headlines will say archaeologists find 18-foot giant under the earth and all these type of things. And there's like hundreds of these articles
hmm
all throughout America from the 1800s. But then when the Smithsonian does turn up, they take the giant bones and they're never to be seen ever again, likely destroyed and disappeared. And then they would deny, and they would say they would underplay. It says they weren't really that tall. They were like 8 foot tall. It's
hmm
called, they like start making up stories after the fact with no evidence to back it up because the bones have disappeared mysteriously,
Uh-huh.
and that was pretty much the trend. And now they're all gone, and nothing's getting found anymore. If it is getting found, you're not finding out about it. That's for sure. But the Smithsonian did a full sweep during that time of the lands of America, and tried to just hide and bury and destroy as much evidence as they possibly could. That much is
Yeah.
very, very clear. And people have written books about that, which I reference in my book. And I've kind of compiled some of the best cases and examples just to give you a flavor of an idea of what happened there. But yes, the evidence of giants is extremely apparent, even up to modern days. But they've just kind of buried all the information. And the Smithsonian played a huge role in that. And obviously, it was to support their evolutionary theory. You
Right.
can't have giants in an evolutionary paradigm. they
Right.
don't they don't fit. So they were trying to rewrite that narrative clearly and just destroy anything that went prior to it. You'll find dinosaurs were kind of invented around the same time, as
hmm
well as a concept. And you're finding giant femurs, and they'll say, "Oh, that belonged to a diplodocus or a T Rex," but
Right.
really it might have been the femur of a human or a giant human-like creature anyway. So it's kind of, you find this chicanery was going on quite a lot during that time. Yeah.
So that makes me think of Stephen King's It, because if you watch the newer version of the movie, they do go into the Native American um, mystery of what Pennywise actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Have anything to comment about that? Because Stephen King, I heard that he was like, I want to write something scary, and what is all the children of the world scared of? And he thought clowns. And so he made it a clown. I'm not saying that's the only reason, that's just what he said. But
Yeah.
that's just weird that all children of the world are scared of clowns, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
why are we always putting clowns in children's activities if they're all gonna just cry? And then when you get to the um heart of like what is Pennywise, he's like an alien, right? He's an alien creature that came to Earth for food, and he took on the 16th century version of a clown.
Basically, yeah. So Stephen King has basically played off the truth. He's probably somebody who's actually in the know about what I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
He knew what a clown really represented, and
Uh-huh.
he's highly fictionalized it in his own fictional framework of mythos. So it is like an interdimensional clown entity from a specific dark dimension where the deadlights reside, and
Deadlight.
he's one of many primordial cosmic horrors, shall we say.
Uh-huh.
And his way he manifests in the physical realm is through manifesting fear in his victims. The
Mhm.
more fear that's there, the stronger he gets, and the more physical he can become in the realm. And if he generates enough fear and enough power is given to him, he can then feed.
Mhm.
That's kind of his game, and he only does it every 27 years, which I believe is the cycle of Saturn, and it's
Ah,
and some kind of like mystical parity. I'm not getting into astrology, but there's something there to do with the cycles of Saturn every 27 years. It hits a
right.
certain point where it's kind of like that whole Mercury and retrograde thing, but for Saturn, it's got its
Mhm.
own thing. And that's when bad things tend to happen in everyone's life. When Saturn's hit this 27-year point, they say based on when you were born is when you'll have this problem.
Mhm.
But whatever. I'm just saying that. So
27 Club. If you're a musician, you might die.
exactly. So it's odd that they link 27 years to it as well with this Saturn symbology and the rest of the Luciferian satanic symbolism mixed in there. But basically, he chose the clown because the clown is a representation of the interdimensional Nephilim, which reside on the other side right now on Earth, who are demons. So he just took that concept and created this fake fictional version of it.
Mhm.
And yes, the idea that demons feed off of fear is actually a very common trope, even in most paranormal circles. And I do think there is an element to that. They call it loosh in more new agey terms, where
Haven't
the
heard that word in a
demons,
long time. Yeah.
yeah, where the demons like generate fear and feed off the
Delicious
fear,
luge. Yeah.
and that's kind of what it does. And he can actually manifest as anything. It's not just a clown. It's just he chose the clown because that's what one of the characters was scared of the
Mhm.
most. But he also manifests other things throughout the film as well. And for example, a leprosy riddled falling apart, decaying man for the child who's a germaphobe,
Mhm.
or he manifests as the picture of a woman who this child is scared of in his dad's office. Things like this. But the clown is just a very terrifying thing, and it's more predominant because it's based off the truth. It represents what demons looked like.
Mhm.
But it is a complete fiction. You have to remember that it's just based off of the truths I've been talking about today.
Right.
Stephen King is not that original, is what I'm saying. He didn't get his ideas from nothing or come up with it because he's so smart. He's just privy to some secret knowledge and has used it to capitalize off of. That's
I
all
don't
it is.
even think he writes all of his books. I think
Probably
it's
not. No. I think he's trying to get into. He's just trying to like soft disclose the occult to a lot of people.
Mhm.
Maybe that's his job. Maybe he's a part of that externalization of the hierarchy thing. That people talk about quite a lot. Who knows? I don't know the guy personally, but I can tell you right now, he did not get that idea because he's so creative. No
right.
way. The clown is just basically based off the truth of the Nephilim, and he's made up his own fiction based on it to make money.
Well,
That much is
and
clear.
not only does it feed off fear, there's also like a sex component in the book and movies that,
Yeah, it gets dark, doesn't it? I know.
yeah.
At the end, the children kind of all collectively do
Ye-
things with the one girl character in order to escape innocence to free. That it gets really weird. It's kind
Yeah.
of like yeah. You have to wonder what King is really into when you start thinking about that kind of thing. Um,
Isaac Weishaupt does a great breakdown of the whole book because he read the book and watched all the movies. And so if you want a detailed thing of it, go check out his stuff. But I wanted to ask you, so they are in another dimension
mhm.
that you can access through psychedelics, correct?
Yes.
And
Predominantly so. It's quite popular in DMT circles that people encounter what are called jesters.
mhm,
It's been a popular idea for a while. There's many people who talk about this. Terence McKenna famously called them the self dribbling basketballs or the machine elves or these self transforming consciousness balls of some kind. But
mhm,
primarily, most people see them manifest as something akin to a jester. That's kind of the only word you've got to describe them. They're
mhm.
not. They don't look like jesters. They're not wearing like you see on the screen here, like silly costumes with bells on the end and stuff like that. Their skin is quite literally that shape and color. They're not wearing a costume. They look like this because they
Yeah.
have the parents' skin.
Right.
And we've just called it something akin to a jester. And jesters, funnily enough, have actually very little to do with the Nephilim. They come from comedians, a lot of these out of work actors I mentioned earlier coming out of Rome.
Mhm.
Well, they were hired by rich men to be personal comedians because kings could have them.
Mhm.
Who's gonna say no to a king? You know what I mean? So it became quite like a hot commodity for the rich and influential to have their own personal jester. So there was a lot of money in being a private comedian for private people. And his job was to mimic the king. So he dressed in a fake floppy crown with a floppy scepter, and he would be a mimic. He's a mime, and he would
Mhm.
mock the king and dress like the king in a silly way. And that's all a jester costume is really based on. It's just a coincidence that the Nephilim basically looked like jesters in the disembodied form. They can, and probably by virtue of them having horns in some senses, which are like jester caps,
Mhm.
and having just clownish like features. I think later iterations of jesters started to take inspiration from Harlequin, I mentioned earlier, who's
Mhm.
modeled after the Wild Man. So it became this thing you see here now, which is closer to like a clown king hybrid. Do you get what I mean?
Mhm.
But the original jesters didn't really look like clowns exactly. They look like the king, you know. So it's kind of adapted closer to what they look like in the disembodied form as
Well,
the tradition went on throughout history, I'd say.
look at their costumes. You mentioned the geometric patterns on their clothing. And this is kind of what you see when you are tripping hard. Like
Yes.
if you take DMT or something, there you go. You're going
Yeah.
to see a lot of bright colors. You're going to see a lot of geometric patterns. You're going to see a lot of like undulating shapes and weird faces, and things
Yeah.
mocking you, right? Uh,
Yes, absolutely. That's the most common thing people describe seeing. It's kind of like repeatable. It's scientific in a way. You
uh-huh.
take enough DMT for long enough, you get jesters. Like that's what you get,
Right.
you know. And they look like this, like the fighter con. They have
Yeah.
these odd multicolored ribbon patterned bodies, big wide smiles, fieriness to them, like an ethereal nature. Here's another tribe mimicking the Nephilim in their own way with red hair and white skin.
Mhm.
Here's a DMT jester playing with a human toy from the other realm. You know, it's
Oh, yeah.
kind of
And look at his swirly eyes, like hypnotic.
yeah. So these things have always been here. Here's the Kala Sung Sang demon, which you saw Joseph Grimaldi was based on earlier with his upside down handstand position I mentioned earlier. Um, yeah, I mean, you take DMT, you get jesters, and I believe that's what they look like in their disembodied form. That's who you're really dealing with when you encounter these things. I've
Mhm.
made it quite, and this is somebody who comes from the psychedelic background. I used to be a very hard psychedelic tripper before I was
Mhm.
born again in 2014. I
Mhm.
spent a good portion of my life taking a lot of these things quite consistently and documenting it and trying to legitimately find answers. You know, so I've been there. I get it. I empathize with that community.
Mhm.
What I've realized is
Hey,
that
the
these are not.
psychedelic to Christian pipeline is not a joke. Like
No, it happens
lots
a
of
lot.
people have, yeah.
And but the thing, what I'd say is, you know, what I realized is that these are not Jungian archetypes of the collective unconscious trying to show us our own personal shadow or
Mhm.
to teach us a way to incorporate our shadow into ourselves in order to become better people or whatever excuse you want to come up with through a vain philosophical ideology, you know. But these are not reflections of ourselves. These are separate entities that have their own separate consciousness from us that are there for a very specific, historically accurate, and traceable reason. And they are not your friends.
Mhm.
Okay. They are your enemies who are out to get your body. And for any means you
Ex
let them in, they'll
They want
take
to
it.
experience the physical world through your body, right?
Exactly. And
Okay.
they will tell you anything to get there and for you to open up that channel. And if they can get you mimicking them, dressing like them, and acting like them, then you're creating stronger channels for them to come here. Here's the Wanginas with the rainbow serpent father, for
Hmm.
example. You
Hmm.
know, and that's that they are these things in the
The
spiritual realm. In
the
the
rainbow
physical, they look
serpent.
like this.
Uh-huh.
In the spirit, they look like jesters. That's basically the difference here. So go ahead. I'll just
I
skip
was just
through
gonna
all
say the rainbow serpent is big in voodoo that we were just talking about, right? The serpent and the rainbow.
yeah, it's everywhere. The dragon mythology is all throughout the land on every single continent, and they just have a different name and a different cultural style of representing them, but they're all talking about the exact same things, and they all have the exact same mythos. They came to Earth and mingled with humanity and created offspring, and
And
these are the Nephilim. Yeah,
isn't
there's the
there?
Warlord of the Jesters with the Billikens.
Oh yes, there he is with the little belly button.
That's it. Mirth is well, it's not a belly button. That's the tip of his thing.
Oh.
Yeah, he's always erect.
Does that
Uh,
mean like you remember troll dolls?
I guess they're based off of them. Yeah, in a sense, it's the
Do
same
you
thing.
think troll dolls are like Billikens and their little belly button jewel is like something?
Yes, it's the same
Uh,
thing.
okay.
They're always doing this
I
to us
knew
all
there
the
was
time.
something wrong with trolls. Like,
They're doing this to us all the time. They're showing it all the time, and this is one of those occult things. It's like once you see it, you don't
yeah.
really unsee it. You know now, and there's no really the cat's out of the bag type of situation.
Yeah.
Here's the early Greek.
Dionysus.
This
Yeah.
is the early Greek theater,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where the first proto theater clowns existed. But they're not clowns; they're just people wearing masks
Okay.
acting like famous rich people that everyone would recognize.
Uh-huh.
And this is the tradition that went to Rome, and then out of Rome goes the comedial arts, and then eventually they incorporated Harlequin. This is Harlequin's original form right
Mm-hmm.
here,
Mm-hmm.
wearing this beast mask with this multicolored patches, and he developed slowly into like a multicolored tight skinned leotard thing by the 1800s. But by this point, he was boring. He wasn't demonic anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and he needed replacing. And that's when the modern clown replaced this thing, and it became like truly demonic. It became this. Like, so there's
Yeah.
Harlequin and the clown. The clown now dresses like this monstrous thing you see here.
Uh-huh.
When originally, if I can find it, he actually dressed like I've got here. Here's the French version, plain white
That's what I
rags,
was thinking of when you were talking about that. Yeah.
plain white ruffled rags.
Yeah.
That's Greek theater again. I've got it somewhere. Pedrolino. He has his hands in his pockets like some kind of anime character, thinking he's really cool. But it's just boring. He looked boring to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so here's what Harlequin and Pedrolino used to look like next to each other, and then
Mm-hmm.
it became that psychedelic mess I mentioned earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It suddenly switched, and it's kind of like, what the hell happened? Why did the switch happen? How
Yeah.
did the clown go from that to this? It
Right.
makes no sense until you understand that it was done on purpose by Freemasons who had modeled it after Indian demons. Like, it's it's bizarre, it's an odd story. And there's another example of Indian Rakshasas, pale
Oh
white
yeah.
skin,
Look at
red
him with
hair.
the
Yeah,
head of
it's
head
I,
necklace.
I've got haven't I have this file is just full of hundreds. There's a drawing I did in my early research, but they're everywhere. Dragons are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's the psychedelic clown demons people see on DMT, for example. You know what I mean? They are
Yeah. Ooh.
all over them. Yeah, they are. These are AI generated examples
Uh-huh.
because it's hard to draw something you see on DMT, but with AI, we're getting a very close look these days. But you'll find the secret to being famous today in the West is not to have any talent; it's to dress like a clown, and you will be elevated. You'll be put on the spotlight. You'll be put in front of people and made an idol of,
Mm-hmm.
not because your music's good, but because you look a certain way. Because the Freemasons who run these industries are in the game of getting more people to dress this way.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can put idols out there who look like they dress in this clown aesthetic, more people will emulate their idols and dress like them. And then you get more people copying that style. And then you get new up and coming musicians copying the styles of the greats, like David Bowie, let's say, with his white skin, red haired Iggy Stardust character, a
Uh-huh.
legend in death, a god in death. Well, if I want to be famous, I better dress like he did, right? So people
Mm-hmm.
copy and emulate this pattern over and over again. And then it
Huggy Wuggy.
popularized.
Ew.
Yeah, I know, right? And it
Tell us about
popularizes.
him. I hate that thing.
Yeah, and it's pushed on the kids, this thing as well. But you'll find, like I said, in the modern world, this aesthetic has been a common theme all through the 80s. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? All through like that glam rock style up into modern fashion. These are quite famous people here. You got Boy George there, and you've I forgot his name. I'd done a whole thing. Lee Bowery, right there, invented this modern style, which is where the modern trans style comes from. Is mainly based off of his original aesthetic,
Hmm.
and you can clearly see where he gets his inspiration from. It's not a joke. It all comes back to these ancient traditions. Here's sacred clowning of the Heyokas of the North American plains. Now,
Oh.
they believe these clowns are an integral part of their community. They're there to teach people how not to behave. But when you actually look into what they base themselves off of, they base themselves off of a god called a Wikinyan, who brings thunder and rain. And he looks like a psychedelic clown monster. And he is basically a human dragon hybrid or the Thunderbird hybrid, shall we say. They have a different name for them, you know.
Hmm.
Here's the Wild Man of Europe. This is what Harlequin's based off of. And this is what these characters are based off of as
Is
well in
that
their cultures.
Belschnickel or somebody? What is his name?
Yeah, same thing
No,
for the
not
Christmas tradition.
Krampus.
Belschnickel, yeah, Krampus. It's
Yeah.
all the Wild Man of Europe. It's this character here.
Uh-huh.
This is what Harlequin is based on. And this is the Europeans version of Nephilim. There's Huggy Wuggy again with the kids. It's kind of
Cool.
there's another Rakshasa representation. Here's a DMT jester. And this is one of
Yeah.
the old initial artworks before AI. And this is how people tried to describe it.
So,
Um,
do you
yeah,
think this influenced surrealism art?
probably. I mean, surrealist art kind of, and you look at people like Dali, they were always intrinsically linked with trying to square the spirit realm with the physical realm and they'll
Mhm.
represent their dreams and things like this. And you'll find some odd things throughout surrealist artwork. I think, you know, what have artists always tried to do but encapsulate the indescribable. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think a lot of surrealist artwork is this idea of I've seen some things and I don't know how to draw it, so I'm going to try my best, you know. And but now I think with AI, we're getting a real glimpse into
Mm.
more accurate forms, I would say. And you know, they look a lot like what these people who dress like their ancestors dress like in Africa here, for example, like these multicolored fractal patterned messes.
Mhm.
Here's clown core fashion on the runways.
Wow.
Here's an Indian tradition. Here's Ronald McDonald with a screaming
I was
baby.
going to ask you, what do you think of McDonald's and Ronald McDonald and cannibalism? Because
Well, you know, that's a classic one, that isn't it? You know, the you're eating people type of thing. I've heard that many times, but I don't know if that's true. But
and even the baby's crying, right? They
yeah, well, kids don't like clowns. This
no.
is the odd thing. People have done studies. It's like 1 in 10 children actually like clowns.
Mhm.
And even that, and that kid's weird. No one likes kind of what it's kind of, it's not the
But what to
norm.
look out for.
Yeah, most kids don't like clowns, so why are they marketed towards children so much? It's really rare, and it's odd that the fear of clowns, which is called colorophobia,
Uh-huh.
um, is actually really common. Like it's really up there next to spiders and heights. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Yeah.
how is that thing one of the most common fears? It's odd, isn't it? And until you actually, and this is funny because they always release an article every year without fail. I've been tracking it for like 8 years now. Every year they release articles saying scientists have figured out why people are scared of clowns, and they always say it's the uncanny valley. It's almost human but not quite, and it makes us feel uneasy, you know. And also we don't trust people when we can't see the facial features move because of the makeup. So it's kind of it makes us feel naturally uneasy, and that's all it is, you know. Or perhaps we used to be hunted and eaten by something that looked like that as
Yeah.
prey, and
Yeah.
that kind of left a mark on us. And we now instinctively recoil at the thought of something that looks like that. And
Well,
it tells us, our genes tell us, run. Like, because we are prey to these things.
yeah, our
Like,
epic genetic memory is saying these things are dangerous.
yes,
Um, so Alice in Wonderland is something we talk about. Oh, look at that pretty snake.
exactly, yeah.
Um, we talk about in connection to mind control, and you did a whole video on the Mad Hatter and the Red Queen. So can you speak on Alice in Wonderland and
I made that video a long time ago, actually, and I've not something I've not covered recently. So let me see if I can think of my memory. But yes, obviously, the Red Queen is based off of Queen Elizabeth, who
Mhm.
also has this that same style. By the way, there's Pedrolino, the Italian tradition originally before it became French. But there we go. But yeah, I do have a picture of her somewhere on here. If I go back to the different image, I think she's at the bottom somewhere. Um, but yeah, obviously she's based off of Queen Elizabeth, who quite famously used Venetian ceruse, it was called. It was a lead-based white face paint,
Uh-huh.
and her face was like decaying. It was basically damaged from lead poisoning, and it's possibly the thing that killed her, but we don't actually know that officially.
Uh-huh.
But lead poisoning is serious. You know, you don't come back from that very easily, especially when you're caking your face in it all the time. But she was quite famous for having this look: red hair, white skin, multicolor pattern clothing, and
Mhm.
for the royal family to believe that they have the divine right to rule because of the special Nephilim blood, it would
She's
make
Nephilim
sense.
core fashion.
Well, exactly. It would make sense she was kind of trying to emulate it. I mean, even the ruffle around the neck, which was popularized by aristocracy, which
Hmm.
then clowns began to wear, like this thing you see here, that is a distinctly reptilian feature. Only reptiles have the reptilian frill, it's called, which is a big round frill around the neck. And it's a very specific reptile in
Oh,
Australia,
like those
actually, funnily enough.
lizards that go like that.
Yeah, they're quite famously in Jurassic Park, the one that spits in
Yes.
the face has the frill coming up. It's a reptilian feature, and
Mhm.
again you have the aristocracy wearing these massive frills with this look to them. Is it possible they were also trying to emulate something they believe they have a divine connection to? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And why clowns were given that feature? It's not because they're just trying to mock the queen in the funny way they do, but it's actually a distinctive Nephilim feature that just adds to the costume and strengthens the channeling. But yeah, that's who the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland is based off of. And obviously, the Mad Hatter, I mentioned the Hat Man earlier.
Hmm.
He seems to be some kind of shaman or means or connection to the spirit realm. He is like an intermediary between the spirit realm and the physical realm. That's his job. He's not just some unsuspecting person who accidentally got possessed. He
Hmm.
willingly works with demons as in
Hmm.
contracts
He's a
to get
medium.
is a medium, yeah, and perhaps that's what the Mad Hatter was also representing. And obviously, Alice's descent into madness is kind of all involved with that. And there's a lot of psychedelic principles throughout the whole film. But I've
Okay.
not watched it in so long, or read the book in so long that I'd be hard pressed right now to give you much more. But just a surface glance, you have the Cheshire Cat, which has the big wide grin, the big glowing
Oh,
eyes,
yeah.
the psychedelic patterns coming
It's
around
like
him.
that kind of, huh?
Yeah, he looks like a clown. Yeah, so you have to the type of entity she encounters while exploring this psychedelic realm. Perhaps it's a wink and a nod to the DMT experience we mentioned earlier. Perhaps that's all I could probably really say on that
Hmm.
at a glance. At a glance, right now, to be honest. Yeah,
Have you seen um Terrifier, the movie?
I've not seen it, but I've seen plenty of pictures.
Um,
I'm aware. I'm aware of
is
Art
he
the
a
clown.
part of
Yeah.
this?
It's just look. Well, look. There will always be a clown character in media.
Yeah.
Okay. They will continuously make it front and center and reboot a new Joker or a new It or a
Yes.
new clown serial killer. There'll always be a new hot flavor clown of the year because they want people to dress that way for Halloween.
Right.
And they want people thinking it's cool, empathizing with the clown character. You know what I mean?
They want to invoke the Nephilim in the public, right?
Basically, yeah, and the more people they can get dressing this way, the more channels they're opening. Like I said, Lee Bowery popularized this kind of style in the 80s and 90s.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So make it cool to be that way in the fashion industry. And it's they're trying to push it on the people. Like I said, David Bowie
Yeah.
popularized this style through the music industry to get more
Lee
people as an
Stardust.
idol.
That.
Yeah, to get more people as an idol to copy him. And that's the game. So the only reason you see new clown
Well,
characters appearing is because they want to keep it fresh in people's minds. They want people dressing that way in their own fashion, and they want to keep it popular and cool so more people remain as channels readily for these demons. Being ignorant of the spiritual law won't make you immune to it. You
mm,
dress this way, you channel demons, whether you
mhm.
know it or not. That's what you're doing. So they're banking on ignorance, and they're banking on people thinking it's harmless or a bit of fun for the kids. They're giving a lot of sympathy for the devil with this. They're making him a relatable, cool character that
Yes, he's
people
almost the
want
dark hero now.
yeah, that people want to emulate and be like and associate with. But he's basically based off of these characters from ancient folk traditions of Europe. This is the wild man who is based off of ancient demons. Like so you dress like a clown, you're dressing like a Rakshasa demon of India. That's what you're actually doing. You're not dressing like anything unique. It's ancient, it's old. You're dressing up the same reason these guys dress up. You know what I mean? You're dressing in the same
And,
costume
and
that
these are
these people
very
dressed.
old traditions too. I mean, India is probably one of the oldest.
Yeah, oral traditions that have passed down through thousands of years unchanged. They're a glimpse into the ancient past. These remote tribes of cannibals in Papua New Guinea haven't changed their tradition.
Wow.
And they are all trying to remember their ancestors, they call them. But they
Uh-huh.
don't mean like grandma or granddad. They mean the builders of their ancient civilization, primordial gods are their ancestors. They're
Hmm.
talking about the Nephilim. So they
Hmm.
dress in ways that emulate or echo the things that were around at one point because they think they are symbols and standards of beauty, power, and strength. The gods
Hmm.
and kings, the ancient Nephilim. So they have red feathered headdresses and red noses and white skin. In many different ways they do it. Every culture has their own style, but they're trying to emulate something from the ancient past. And that's it. I mean, even look at these early circuses here. This is one of the first Ringling
Yeah.
Brothers posters. I mean, you don't notice it here because it's kind of cut off on the bottom, but this is a giant clown. He has a tiny circus tent at his feet.
Oh, yeah.
And he is a giant among these things. They've
Ringling
kind of
Brothers.
been referencing it since the beginning. They've been telling you since the beginning what the clown is. We're
Yeah.
just not supposed to know. We don't recognize the symbol. We're not in on the joke. You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's always been the case. There's never been a point where the clown or Harlequin or his proto clowns, they have
Mhm.
always been representations of demons. Always. And
Have,
we have forgotten that, and we now associate it with fun
uh-huh.
and frivolity and something fun for the children. You have these elongated skulls that still have the red hair attached, for example.
Whoa.
Of these creepy creatures.
Yeah.
It's here's the Gorgon. This is Medusa.
Hmm.
Okay, she's holding a horse, so she's a giant. She has
Hmm.
wings because she's
Hmm.
half angel. She has a human body with pale white skin, wide mouth, tongue sticking out, and red hair predominantly. This is black on here, but she is a Nephilim. She's a half human, half angel hybrid, and they looked like clowns. There's no two ways about it. That's exactly what they look like. Look, she even has her hands up doing like the na 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 type
Yeah,
of
and tongue
face.
out.
You know what I mean? Where do you think that comes from?
Right.
Like it
Oh,
comes
good
from
point too. And this is also a Masonic hand.
sign of distress, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's the
yeah.
Masonic sign of distress, exactly. Like this is ancient, and they are the offspring of these things.
Hmm.
Okay, like dragons, they are terrifying to behold, and if you saw one today, your heart would drop. And it's kind of a lot of people, especially in the old days of conspiracy, when people were talking about the Nephilim as like a hot button topic, they would always have depictions of the Nephilim as like really tall, ripped humans with tan skin and long brown dreadlocks, wearing like a Conan the
Like
Barbarian
Goliath
animal
or
and
something.
yeah, animal skin loincloth or something like that with like a golden belt buckle. It's kind of
Right.
like that's too human.
Mm.
Like they
Hmm.
wouldn't, and that was what kind of got me onto this. It's kind of like that's not right. That's not what they would have looked like based on who the parents were, and when you put those two things together, you don't get something that looks like a human. I'm sorry, that's just not what they would have looked like.
Hmm.
So that kind of led me on this path, of research, and the connections just keep coming. It's ridiculous. And like I said, I've written my first book on the thing here.
Uh-huh.
You can get it on Amazon, and this is just 300 pages laying out the foundation for the theory. I'm writing the second book now, which would be another 300 pages, just showing all these examples I'm talking about with you right now, but giving you the meat, the history of each individual culture and where they say they get their stuff from, and where my theory comes into it and where the obvious connections are.
Hmm.
Every single culture on the earth, every continent, every village has a folk tradition, and they all communicate with the ancestors by dressing a certain way, and they all have clown features, all of them,
Yeah.
because they're all communicating with the same creatures. Now, don't get me wrong, there'll be many different kinds of Nephilim, but they're all fundamentally reptilian.
Hmm.
So snakes don't all look the same. There's
Hmm.
massive variation between snakes. Okay. The Nephilim too would have a wide variation of color. Some of them would have had blue skin. Some of them would have had red skin, but predominantly white seems to be the go-to. Some would have had a red nose. Some may not have a red nose. Some might have plumed feathered frills. Some might be covered in hair. But the aesthetic similarities are there. Wide smile, buck teeth, bulging eyes, these sharp fanged buck teeth things, a very common thing. Red hair predominantly, tall, multicolored patterns all over the body. You see the themes throughout every culture by the way these ancient folk traditions dress to channel their spirits.
Hmm.
So that's our hint. That's our clue. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And biblically speaking, we are kind of given a hint in the book of Noah, which is found with the book of Enoch. It talks about when Noah was born, his father freaked out and
Hmm.
thought that his wife had given birth to a Nephilim
Hmm.
because he ran to his father and said he looks like one of the sons of the angels.
Yeah.
And he's described as having white skin with red blotches all over it, like polka dots,
Uh-huh.
and golden hair with eyes that shine. So from that, we can infer what Nephilim would have looked like. Something like Noah, pale white skin, glowing eyes, bright colored hair with red patches all over the skin. Now, Noah was a human, but he was clearly a divinely inspired and chosen, specially created human because he was going to repopulate the earth with more humans. So he had that aura about him.
Hmm.
But because his dad's at first thought, is this one of the sons of the angels? We know these sons of the angels had something like that kind of style,
Hmm.
biblically speaking. But we don't have to just go off that. We can look at all these other cultures I'm showing you here, and they show you what they look like. They dress like them. They have them all over the art, where they're in stone. Like they are showing you what these creatures look like,
Yeah.
and they all just have such their own geographically specific story that everyone thinks they're all talking about different creatures.
Hmm.
Everyone thinks they're all talking about something separate from one another, but they're
Hmm.
not. They are the same thing, just in different geographical places. Everyone on the earth dealt with these things. They were everywhere. They were prolific. They were subjugating humanity and eating them.
Hmm.
And this memory is echoed through the folk traditions. And that's where we can see what they looked like. So that's it kind of summarized, and
Yeah. No, this is
yeah.
amazing. Have you seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space? That movie?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, people say that to me all the time. That one, that's a classic. There's Art the Clown, by the way. Just thought I'd bring that up.
Ew.
There's the clown
Well,
serial killer coming out of the void from the other realm, the black and white realm. Beetlejuice wears a black and white fractal patterned thing because he's also trapped in the spirit realm. He
uh-huh.
has white skin and green hair. You find black and white patterns seem to represent them in their spirit form. Here's an African tribe doing something very similar.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, killer clowns from outer space, they're basically just reptilian monsters that have
They're
painted
eating
themselves.
people, right? They're
Yeah,
not just
yeah,
killers, they're actually like consuming them. And
yeah,
you just made me remember who's that serial killer? John Wayne Gacy. He was
yeah.
obsessed with clowns and being a clown. Remember that?
It's funny because at the height of his spree is when he started dressing like a clown. He didn't do
Uh-huh.
it straight away.
Oh.
After he killed 33 young boys, they say. What a
Uh-huh.
coincidence that that number was chosen.
Right.
But it was only like when he was like 20 people in that he started dressing like a clown. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he was only a half-hour drive away from his local Royal Order of the Jesters Lodge. He was only a 2-hour drive away from the headquarters of the Royal Order of the Jesters in
Oh, wow.
Indianapolis. And he was caught communicating with two men, and it was recorded. It's one of the things that got him convicted
Hmm.
about trafficking young boys, and he was
Hmm.
buying them to murder, rape. It's highly likely he was associating with the Royal Order of Jesters, who also have been implicated in human trafficking quite
Hmm.
publicly. You can find the FBI records.
Hmm.
Perhaps he started dressing like a clown because he started to understand what it really represented, and maybe he was an insider. He was a member of the Blue Lodge, the Moose Lodge in his area.
Hmm.
He was photographed with like members of the Senate. He had a S pin in his picture, special services pin. He seems to be well connected, and
Yeah.
he dressed
Well,
like clowns and painted clowns and murdered people. And like I said, he seems to have
any
these odd connections.
any study into serial killers, you're going to find that they don't act alone a lot of times. Most times it's more of a ring, and that person's just kind of a fall guy or, the
Mm.
patsy or whatever. So that's so
Oh
crazy.
yeah, it seems that way. Honestly, like that guy is definitely it's sus. Like it's very sus. And one thing I think is fun we should mention. I mentioned Red Nose Day earlier. It's like this public yearly event in the Anglosphere where
Mhm.
like they get the public to dress like a clown basically to raise money for charity. They say.
Oh,
Now the Red Nose officially the story goes that a German actor in a circus was kicked onto the stage after an argument with his boss from the dressing room, and he broke his nose. And when he got up during the show that was going on, everyone laughed at him and called him August, which meant fool in German.
mhm.
And because his nose was swollen and red and bleeding. And then it became like a staple of the circus from that day on. Now, I think that's a load of nonsense. I think there's no evidence that or record of that happening anywhere. No one
Mhm.
knows where that story came from. It just seems like a made up story, to be honest. What's more likely is that they had what's called a rhinophyma. So here is a example of a human with a rhinophyma. It's where
Mm-hmm.
the nose grows to be a big bulbous mass.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets very red in its extreme end stages. I think I've got a picture here at the top, actually. It can get really horrible looking. And it's called the curse of the Celts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's something white people predominantly deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the more common in white people. That's why they call it the curse of the Celts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically rosacea, where people get patches of red all over the skin.
Mm-hmm.
But they call this like term end stage rosacea, like end stage cancer. This is end stage rosacea. This is the most extreme manifestation of rosacea. It's genetic. You can't catch this, and you can't cause this by drinking too much alcohol or something, which a lot of people seem to equate this sickness with.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing to do with that. It's purely genetic, and it's predominantly a problem people with very pale skin have. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nephilim were known to have extremely white, pale skin. So it's likely they also developed this issue where as they got old, the nose grew to be bulbous and they gained a rhinophyma, which is the curse of the Celts today. So humans get this as well. It's a genetic condition specifically. I'm not saying it's inherited from the Nephilim or something like that. If it's just a problem people with pale skin get,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people with like black skin, brown skin, whatever skin, who can get it, but it's rare. It's extremely rare. So this
Right.
is not caused by alcoholism. This is not self-inflicted. It's a purely genetic condition. The only way to fix it, as you can see this man's had done here, is you shave it off with a hot wire and you resculpt the nose back into a normal human shape. It's the
Oh,
only way to get rid of it. You burn it off and literally slice it away and turn it into something new. Not pleasant, I know, but that is likely what the Nephilim had, which is why they end up the clown
oh,
costume shows some
maybe
of these bulbous
because they
red
were
noses.
like abomination type creatures that they have the default.
Yeah, they had like a default in the genes. Yeah, some kind of corruption. It's. I mean, here's an African example, and they've got the red polka dots
Uh-huh.
on the face, probably rosacea, an
Uh-huh.
example of rosacea
Uh-huh.
manifesting. And here's Inuit masks. Now the Inuits are creepy. They're not okay. The Inuits are not okay. I have to say this. There's something wrong with them, right? They
Okay.
are terrified and terrifying people. They are
Yeah.
so scared. They are scared of the spirits. They'll tell you that we're terrified of the spirits, and they make masks to appease them and to beg them not to bring drought and famine and stuff. And this
Wow.
is what they think they look like. This is what they manifest their demon masks as. I think it's called a turn gak is what they call it.
Hmm.
The turn gaks are the demons that the shamans channel and work with for power. So this is what they believe the Turngats look like: white face, red mouth, wide grin. This is just their culturally specific way of depicting the exact same thing the Indians are depicting with Rakshasas. This is
Yeah.
just their artistic style of
Right.
doing the same thing. And yeah, like I said, you find the red nose does crop up quite a lot in some examples. And the modern clown always sports the red nose as well. So I mean, here's a Raksha, for example, with a red nose. It's not always there, but is there sometimes as well. Just like in humans, not all white people get it. So I think that's where we get the red nose from,
Hmm.
really, and why clowns use red noses. I mean, look at Medusa here. She looks nothing like what you've been told
Right.
through modern media.
Uh-huh.
She looks more human, with
Yeah.
white pale skin, with wings because she's half angel, with this wide serpent grin and pale skin with patterns all over it like a snake.
Wow.
This is what the Nephilim truly. She has a snake in her mouth there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and this is what they would have really looked like. Um, there you go. The Nephilim look like clowns. I think I've tried to prove it to you
Well,
here today.
you convinced me. I mean, Paul, you blew my mind twice in the last month on your channel, and that's not easy to do because I feel like I've seen and heard it all. But first, with the parasites look like demons, or not look like parasites are the conduit, maybe for uh
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
yeah, that and this is just amazing. Like it's actually really refreshing and original and mind-blowing and just super informative. And I recommend everybody go to Understanding Conspiracy and check out this presentation, especially about clowns. But you have so many other great videos. Like you're one of the best conspiracy channels that I've come across on YouTube in a long, long time. So I hope if you have something new, you can come back anytime. But this was a banger. You crushed it. You convinced me. You scared me. It was creepy. It's spooky season. We've got Insane Clown Posse up in the house. And I want to thank you for coming in. Is there anything else you want to add and tell us where we can find all of your information?
Yeah, every year the Insane Clown Posse throw a party in a Freemason hall, so that should tell you something.
Oh, well, okay.
But other than that, yeah, you can find me on YouTube. I've been doing the podcast circuit for over a year now. You sounded like Sam Tripoli for a second there, and I
I
remember
just
doing
did
so.
his show. That's why I started.
I was on Sam Tripoli as well about 6, 8 months ago, talking about this as well.
Oh, cool.
But like I said, I published a book 3 months ago. We've sold 2,000 copies in 3 months, so it's going quite well.
Very good.
You can get it on Amazon. Just type in the Nephilim look like clowns and look for this thing you see right here. Um, I'm not just making this up, is what I'm saying. I bring the evidence. There's over 300 references in this first volume alone, showing
Wow.
you the history of the clown. It's not actually hidden. You just have to go looking for it. Some of the connections I have made myself about the costume of a clown relating to Indian demons it has been confirmed since my research. There's an
Mhm.
episode of Supernatural, for example,
Mhm.
made in 2002, so way before I even got in the game, which is about a circus clown who gets invited into a house by a child. So it's vampire rules, you have to invite it in, and
Mhm.
it eats the parents. Turns out it's a ancient Indian demon called a Rakshasa in the show. So they were telling you then in 2002,
Yeah.
it's always been there in our faces. But
Oh, 2002. Wow. Okay.
I only discovered that episode months after making my own connection. So it is real, it is there, and just go and look. I'm not a guy who actually cares about clowns. I wasn't raised even giving them a second thought. It's not like I thought I'd be doing this. I really didn't think I'd be doing this.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's kind of once you see it, you can't unsee it. What I primarily am doing with my work is I'm trying to get people to take biblical history seriously. And I'm
Mhm.
giving them a bridge here. I'm giving them something they can relate to, that they can connect to and understand and see viscerally. Spiritual warfare is real, and we are up against unseen forces, wickedness in high places, as it mentions in Ephesians 6:12. And we do have weapons against these spiritual forces. And I don't know where your audience or you land with this, and I'm not trying to be pushy, but fundamentally, if you do encounter anything like this, just call on the name of Jesus Christ, and these
Mhm.
things do flee. Okay, it's tested, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm trying to reach the psychedelic community as well. It's where I come from. The jesters are not your friends.
Mhm.
Okay, they're not what you think they are.
Mhm.
And they're not you reflecting your shadow back at yourself. They are an ancient enemy of mankind, and you need to be careful. And they are liars. They will lie to you. So that's my work. Find me on YouTube, Understanding Conspiracy, and find the book on Amazon.
Perfect. And we will see you all next time with Isaac Weishaupt and aliens and throughout history using people like you just said, it's the same story, different flavor, mixing the genetics of human beings and extraterrestrials. So look for that. And thanks for coming, everyone.